Okay, hi everybody. So this is Erin. Erin is a student in our current Grammy program, and she is at Ross A. Netherwood School, which is in New Brunswick. Correct?
Yes.
Yes. And Erin, when did you join the program? I'm trying to think.
I'm almost positive in end of October, November.
Yes. Okay. End of October.
Um,
I think it was Nick that enrolled you into the program.
yeah, it was.
All right. Okay.
Absolutely. And
Awesome.
it was right before I submitted my supplementary stuff to Queens. That's why.
Right.
So,
Okay, okay, perfect. Okay, so she enrolled end of October-ish. And since joining the program, she recently found out that she's won a $28,000 scholarship, which is huge. And we were just talking about before we started this how you're not even all the way through the process. So that's kind of like the starting point for you. And then you still have a lot more to go. But $28,000 is obviously a lot of money. And we're super proud of you. And so we're super excited that you get to share what that process has actually been like for other
yeah.
students as well. So obviously $28,000 is a lot of money, but I want to start by going back to like, what did that look like before you joined the program at the end of October? Like, where were you at, not just with the scholarship process, but like with the university application process as well? What did that look like?
Yeah. So I had applied to all my universities. I hadn't really submitted any personal statements or supplementary stuff. I hadn't started applying for any scholarships. And I think I was honestly really anxious about the process before joining, just because, especially like with my scholarship essays and with my PSEs and my supplementary stuff, just because like I tend to be sort of an anxious person, and I'll admit that. But also because I'm very type A, very perfectionist, and I tend to, when I write something, rework it and rework it and rework it until I don't like it anymore. And I think going into this, like, I'm even looking back now, knowing that like having a little bit of reassurance and constructive feedback that would allow me to feel confident in my writing, I think was super, super helpful. And I wish I had known going into it that like it was going to be okay. You don't need to touch your essays 6,000 times until they're garbage. Like they're okay. You just need to tweak it a little bit.
Right, right. Okay. I think that's something that probably a lot of students can relate to because I feel like we hear that from a lot of students, which is like,
Yeah.
I was so anxious about the whole process and I didn't know like what steps I should be taking. And like you said, like perfectionism, which I think is like a huge thing. I think one thing to note about that is that's actually like one of the things that prevents people from even starting, right?
Yeah.
The fact that you kind of were like, okay, I am a perfectionist and like I want to submit really good work, but like I'm still gonna do it. Like that's
Yeah.
not gonna prevent me from even starting is like a big difference between you and probably most students, right? Because most students are like, no, like it's too overwhelming. I can't even get started on the process, right?
Yeah.
Which is how, that's the reason why most students don't even apply to scholarships. So for you, I think that's super relatable because that's probably what a lot of students are going through, right? It's like I'm
Yeah.
not capable of even doing it. And so and obviously it goes to show with $28,000 that it is possible and you perfect it, but only to a certain point, and then you're like, okay, this is really great work, and like I can submit it, and I can actually have success with it. So,
Yeah.
um,
Absolutely.
yeah, I think that totally makes sense. Awesome. And then like, so like, where like you obviously you've gone into your schools and you've won scholarships, and so like, what did it actually take to like get there? Like, what is that process like to go through?
I think the biggest thing for me, or the biggest thing that impacted whether or not I was successful or not, was my time management. And I know that's cliche and everybody says it, but I am the biggest procrastinator. And so being able to have access to a resource that kind of laid everything out in front of you, like in your modules and in your scholarship tracking sheet, and being able to see that and like visualize it. I know lots of people are very visual. So being able to visualize that and then determine what was attainable and what the steps that you needed to follow were, especially because I know so many of the kids like me in this program are super, super busy and have tons and tons of volunteer leadership, athletic and academic like commitments. Being able to see that and actually make a plan, like that's, I think, was the biggest thing for me.
Totally. I love what you said about like time management is such a critical piece of this, but I love what you said about it being visual because I
Yeah.
think that's like a missing piece for so many students is that like they're like, oh, I'm gonna apply to scholarships or like I'm gonna apply to these schools, but like it's not actually like it's not written down anywhere. Like the
Yeah.
data and the information isn't actually organized.
I know before I had all these bookmarks and all this stuff, but everything that I had and everything that I was trying to access was all in a different, like totally different spot. So I think it's important to have something that's cohesive.
Yeah. That's so true. And what you like, it's very true what you said, because like the reality is the best scholarship candidates are the ones that are the most busy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we hear students say all the time, like students that aren't in the program, they're like, oh, I don't know if I have enough time to apply to scholarships. But it's like, well, if you don't have enough time, like I don't know how the students in our program are doing it, because they're like the busiest students out of like any student, because like you said, it's like volunteer and all these initiatives, and then the academic and extracurricular aspect of it. And so time management, I think, is like, yeah, critical. And so for you, it's been just organizing that information, really,
Yeah.
and saying like, okay, this is what I need to do. It's in front of me. Probably deadlines. Is that like?
Yeah, deadlines is something that I've had to work on as an individual and as a student. Like throughout the last couple of years, I've really had to be, okay, this is when this is due, so this is when I need to finish it by. Otherwise, knowing myself, that it won't get done.
Right.
So that was definitely something that was really important for me as well.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I love the idea of making it visual. I think for students, that's going to be like a really big, that, you know, even if you aren't in our program, like that's a really big part of it, like organizing yourself in a way where the information is accessible to you. And
Yeah.
like you said, like scholarship tracking sheet, like you see the deadlines, so you know they're like there. And then obviously for you guys as well, it's like not only do you have the scholarship deadlines, but you have the deadlines to submit them to us, because we need them in advance of like the actual deadline.
I found that really helpful. Having to get it into you 7 days before was like, okay, I can't leave it till the night before it's due.
Right.
So,
Okay, that's good to know that you found that.
Yeah, no, I like that.
Okay, awesome. That's good. And that is true. Like we don't like, we kind of, I guess, inadvertently like set it up that way, but it is true, because to you, the deadline is like, okay, if it's April 30th, to you, it's actually like April 22nd or 23rd, right? So you're like, okay, I have to get it done for April 23rd, but then you actually have an extra 7 days for us to work together to be like, okay, like what changes do we need to make? Like what adjustments do we need to have? And you've done, and you know this because you've been doing that work with us for a while now, right? So that's good to know that you like that. But I think that's true, like regardless of whether you're in the program, like you should set up deadlines in front of the actual deadline, because like the worst thing is to be doing it at 11:59 the night before it's due, right?
I'm definitely guilty of that in the past. So
yeah, awesome. Okay, that's really great advice, I think, for students. Awesome. Okay, so you obviously, time management has been critical, and like you said, like making it visual, and I think that's super great advice for students to really understand when they're about to go through this process. Is there any other advice that you'd have for, say, maybe younger students, like grade 10 and 11 students that are thinking about, you know, what it might take to actually have success with scholarships when they get into grade 12? Do you have any advice for that at all?
I just think start early. I didn't even start thinking about scholarships till like September, October of my grade 12 year. And I think some people would say, okay, well, that's enough time. But I wish I had started last year. And definitely like in grade 10 and 11, and just being aware and understanding what it was going to take, because I know that like my guidance counselors didn't really bring it up last year, and having more awareness of it and access to that information would have made a big difference for me.
Yeah, totally. So start as early as I 100% would agree with that. Like start as early as you can. Even if most of the applications actually come in grade 12, it's like you can start doing that work now, like building out the essay templates and really looking at like what could I be eligible for, right? Because the reality is if you start in grade 12, you're kind of stuck with whatever you've done. But if you start looking at them in grade 10, then it's like, well, you can be built into the type of student that could be eligible for $20,000, right? So it would make a really big difference. Awesome. Okay, that's such great advice. Great advice for students. And then I guess my last question for you, which you've already touched on a little bit, would be like, how has the program helped you so far? Like, what has the program helped you with the most?
The essay editing service was definitely the most instrumental piece for me, just because it, like I said, it gave me that confidence before I submitted it, and I kind of felt like I had a bit of a sense of that it was going to be okay. Like having had your feedback and implemented it, I knew that I had done, I think, everything that I could have done. And being able to just let that go and be confident in myself and know that I worked my hardest. And then had also had some professional input on it. Like that just gave me security, I guess.
Totally. Yeah. The essay the essay editing is like a really good piece of it. And like one thing I want to say about what you've been doing, and you kind of touched on this earlier, is like it's not like you just submitted essays on a whim. Like
Yeah.
what you really did was like you looked at, okay, like we set you up with modules and we really helped you design like what does a winning application look like, and you actually implemented that before submitting it to us, right?
Yeah.
It's super challenging for us if you're submitting stuff on a whim when you haven't actually gone through like the modules and really looked at like, okay, what, like how does the star structure work, like how should I be structuring out these paragraphs, right? But you actually were looking at that, and so when you sent us like your first copies of your applications, we were like, these are already really great, and it for us it's like a lot less work on our end, because we're like, Erin actually took the time to say like what does a winning application look like. I'm gonna like follow through the modules, and then by the time you submitted it, it was like easy for us, right? Because we're like, she already really has the framework here, and so it's just making small adjustments to like make her language more powerful, or you know, to elaborate on different pieces. So that's like really like amazing for us to get to work with students that like before you even submit an application, you've already really done the work on your end to say, what should this look like, right? And
I really liked the star structure because for me, like in the past and in English classes especially, my teachers always telling me that I write like I'm writing a history essay. And so I struggled with that, but I think I really just loved how your modules and how the star structure allowed me to like speak vividly and tell a story, as opposed to like, here are the facts, this is what I've done. Instead, like I was able to convey my message in a more effective manner, for sure.
Yeah, totally. And the star structure is really great at ensuring that you're not skipping steps, right? Because like for a scholarship committee, like every piece of that structure is like critical information for them to know. And then obviously there's a really big emphasis on action. And one of the biggest problems that we see with students, you know, early on when they join the program is that instead of like actually like describing their impact and like the action that they took, they're actually just listing out their different activities and then listing out the key attributes that they develop. But for us, it's like what we need to see is like, what was that activity? And then like, how did you actually take action to get to the end result, right? And we actually need to see how that happened. So it's not just listing out everything you've been involved in and then like listing all the key attributes you learned from it. You have to like connect the two by showing us like the action that you actually took in each piece of involvement, which is like something that you've done really well in your essays, right? Is like actually piecing that together to say, what is that action? Like, what was my actual contribution that led to that end result for like whatever specific group it was that I was working within. So I think that's and that's what a lot of students I think miss on applications.
Yeah.
They're just essentially listing things. So yeah. Awesome. Okay, I think that's super helpful for students, and I think that really gives students and parents, I should say, because I think that gives students and parents like a really good understanding of like what does it actually take to be the type of student that comes in. You're kind of unsure. Like you said, you didn't even start looking at scholarships until October, and then now you're here. The year's not even over, and you've already secured $28,000 in scholarships, which is amazing. That's like a lot of money, right?
Thank you.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing, right? It's something to be super proud of. So I think, yeah, you've really given students and parents an idea of like what that actually looks like, and the time management and the visual aspect of it, right? Like having it in front of you and making it real. Because you can walk around saying like I want to win scholarships, and that's great. But if there's no structure in place and it's not visual, and you're not like, okay, here's the steps I actually need to take, then it's not really real, right? So I think that's awesome. Okay, thank you so much, Erin, for sharing. I really appreciate your time, and yeah, I look forward to chatting with you again soon.
Bye.